Hello and welcome to the channel. I am trying out to test my YouTube and Twitch and just live streaming in general. I'm not used to it as much. Let me see if I get that centered. And so I just wanted to talk about doing knowledge management today and trying to double check before I really get into it whether or not I'm actually streaming. So, oh, that's not good. Okay, I need to lock those. Stop. I just want to move the window. Okay, so the thing is, knowledge management is a aspect to life that allows you to organize each and every individual facet of your life. Whenever you are creating content or doing journaling or even just living the life that you want to live as a multidisciplinary person, you have to have, let me see if I can decrease the size of this. Too much. You have to have a way to organize all of that. And I found that knowledge management is the key to doing it. Using tools like Notion or Obsidian are the ways to doing it. Now, I'm not sure exactly if this is actually going through or not. I need to double check. It does not say I am live. Oh, I am live on Twitch. Cool. So the idea behind knowledge management is allowing yourself to find ways of like, okay, I like this, this, and this. Well, how do I go about actually pursuing those different things over the course of my life? And I need to check this real quick before I really feel comfortable getting into the topic. How do I check whether or not I'm live? It doesn't say I'm live. Shorts, maybe. Live. I guess I'm not live on YouTube Shorts. Maybe it'll show up later and I can use this for clips. All right. How I got into knowledge management. Let's go with that. That's the title of the video here, and I just want to go into it with you. Hopefully someone comes in and starts chatting. The idea behind why I got into it is because I wanted to find a way to organize my self-education. I started out with my do-it-yourself modular degree. I used to call it the DIY degree. And this is back in like 2017-ish or so like that, and I decided I don't want to go to college. I want to pursue my own education, and I found myself kind of stuck. I was like, how do I pursue my own education? There's not really like anybody really doing it out there. I soon found out there was a few people who kind of did it, and I wrote about them, I made videos about them, and that's kind of how I started the YouTube channel as well. But I found myself like, okay, I have edX and Coursera especially, but even FutureLearn, Udacity, and even Stack Skills too. And I had all these different courses that I wanted to take, literally over 400 courses, hundreds and hundreds of courses. And I'm like, how do I organize them? How do I prioritize them? And how do I sort them based on what taxonomy too do I choose? And so I found myself thinking, okay, I want to do semesters like a traditional degree. I could do sprints, or you could do it topic-based as well. I ended up doing my semesters as kind of like a dual topic. So I've always really liked this idea of science and philosophy combined together, so I would often try to incorporate that into my semesters. So I think at one point I had like Buddhist philosophy and quantum physics together, for example. And that's kind of an extreme example, but I just wanted to give you a picture, paint the picture. And I found that creating a list is one thing, but then sorting it was a whole other aspect. And really at the time I was just using Google Sheets because I was used to some databases, if you will, but I wasn't really used to anything fancy. I wasn't doing super fancy Excel stuff or anything like that. And then I had this list. I realized I could sort them into different tabs, like having different sheets for different semesters. And then I had the master sheet as well, but there was no way to like group them together, so I couldn't just like collapse a group and clear off my screen and focus just on one thing. And I found myself moving to Airtable, and I still use Airtable for a lot of things nowadays. Even the PolyTools channel that I run, all the tools are listed out in Airtable. And while I would want to find an alternative so I can beat their pricing plans because I don't want to pay $30 a month just for more than 1,000 items. But my point is, I was able to group things together into different semesters, but again, you can choose whatever taxonomy you want. And that was a really powerful change. Having a new tool allowed me to reorganize and reimagine what it meant for me to make this. And eventually I moved on to Notion. And Notion's where I really started getting my kick for knowledge management, project management, and even task management too. And while I'm still not great at task management, it's one of those things where some people just aren't really used to tasks. And if you have good enough project management, you probably don't necessarily always need tasks to orient yourself to do stuff. I work off my calendar, for example. But I wanted a way to show things onto my calendar, or at the very least have a calendar in the app. And that was kind of the other thing where I wanted to pursue this course on this day. And eventually around this time too, I'm also creating my content production ecosystem as well, which when you're creating at least one YouTube channel, now I have 3, and then 1 or 2 podcasts like I have now, and then all the blog posts that I wanted to create, as well as some other series that I had and newsletters. There's all these different content types and pillars that I wanted to organize, and each one needs its own tab really to have its own series and have its own sequential list. And that way, each sequential list, I can prioritize which ones need to go out first that are more either prudent for SEO purposes or prudent for future books or courses or digital products that I wanted to create. And so this organization for the content management system needed to be really strong. Notion allowed me to create this intricate database, and I had the calendar view, which now links to Google Notion Calendar, which is really great. I wish it would show it up on my Google Calendar, but I'm not sure if there's a setting I need to turn on. But essentially, even on Notion Calendar at least, I have on each day I can choose, like, I want this thing at the top, and I just drag it down each day, pick a time that I want to work on. Because what I had done is that I would give each blog post a different date, and it allowed me to choose whether or not I wanted to do it on this day and this day. And if I missed a day, I could pretty easily shift them all down. It was I wish it was easier than this, but I could literally just drag and drop each one and push them all back. And while that was still a lot of work, it was a lot better than what other tools had provided. Capacities and Obsidian weren't allowing me to do that particular fix, if that makes sense. And even now, I'm still in Obsidian, but I just do less planning on which days I do it. On my calendar, I just say make a blog post, and then I go into my list and I choose from that first phase. And so I kind of added these new techniques to fix that. We can get into that later though. And so at this time, I'm building up the modular degree, I'm building up my content ecosystem. So I have this input and output, and I start doing less courses. I stopped doing as much learning, and I probably should go back to doing more learning. But I started realizing too that I was only tracking courses, and yet I'm listening to podcasts, reading books, watching YouTube videos to learn. And I wasn't keeping track of learning all this different stuff. And while I don't necessarily think you need to make notes on every single piece of content you consume, it would probably benefit you to do something like that. And I say you, but also me, myself. And so having a system that tracks, if you're watching a 30-minute video, you're taking up 30 minutes of your time, or at least 15 if you're speeding it up. And you might want to write down a lesson you've learned from that. And then if you watch multiple videos and podcasts and courses and books and audiobooks around that same topic, then you could take that little piece of knowledge using something like Cortex, which is a new tool that came out, and you have a little idea note that you took from one piece and an idea note you took from another piece, and you could put them together and synthesize a new idea. And that's where that bi-directional linking from like Rome Research, or my particular opinion, Obsidian's better for that. It allows you to kind of link those together by tagging or other methodologies, but allowing you to take those little ideas that you get from one video and really coming together into something new. And Cortex is really kind of meant for the content creators as well, because you can take those ideas and turn them into content. And that's really kind of one of the main philosophies of Cortex. And I think it's cortex.co is the URL if you're interested. And so this idea of creating an ecosystem of content, organizing all my learning, and creating that kind of funnel from the input and output was really motivating me. So I started working on the holistic system. Well, I realized, especially since Ali Adal talked about it a lot, I think Thomas Franklin as well, like they had the yearly notes, and they were doing stuff, reviewing the last year, planning out the next year. And then I haven't seen really anybody talk about quarterly notes or quarterly alignment, but I think it's one of the more powerful ones. And while I still need to work on the template myself, I think for others to use, I've really kind of come down to Ikigai and the 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars is a philosophy I created for self-development over a decade ago at this point. But I really incorporated it into this quarterly layer of the PIOS, which I'll get to what that is in a moment. But 4 pillars are the mind, body, spirit, and emotions. These 4 pillars are the major aspects of your life, and how you incorporate those 4 pillars into your life is very important. And that's why every quarter you kind of have to do this analysis of yourself. Are you really pursuing your spiritual development, your physical development, your mental development? Are you really understanding your emotions or understanding the emotions of others? Do you have that EQ? And so these are the things that I want people to realize that are out there. Like, you have to really incorporate these things into your life and track whether or not you're actually doing anything with it, and are the actions you're taking aligned with what you want for those pillars. Same thing goes for Ikigai. The Ikigai is your reason for being. It is the reason why you get up in the morning, right? It's your vocation, like job, like what the world needs, what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and then if you can make money off of it, that kind of thing, and a combination of those 4 areas. And so it's more professional, whereas the 4 pillars is more personal. And then the monthly layer. The monthly layer, I found myself really starting to focus on my Now Page vlogs that I do. And the Now Page is this system I created, this series I created based off of Derek Sivers' idea of a Now Page. A Now Page is basically you just share what's going on in your personal, professional lives. You have a couple paragraphs, and you just update it once a month. Well, I found that I was doing that for a couple months, and I was like, I want to turn this into a series. And I realized just like a month ago that I was literally doing monthly notes without realizing it. I called it something else. I called it content, but really it was my personal notes that I was just making public. And so I definitely think that a lot of people they just do daily notes. They don't do the yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily notes. And there's a cool plugin on Obsidian called Journals that allows you to do those different layers. And so monthly talks about the projects and the goals. And within those projects and goals, you have your tasks. And that's where you can start to really kind of get into the minute details if you want to. And you can start planning out, what am I going to get done this month? And then how do I go about doing that? And so like right now, a goal of mine is to get a job so I can save up around 5K so I can move to Austin, right? That's a pretty big goal, but it's a goal that I've had for a while, and I'm much closer to doing it. I just need to get the income at this point. But a project of mine was working on the website. I needed to get that website revamped, redone, because the old site was getting kind of clustered, if you will, and it wasn't really showcasing what it needed to, which is like the newsletter and the membership. Not to mention the actual blog posts that I'm spending so much effort on. And then we go down to the weekly layer, which is systems and habits. And I've changed this system quite a bit over the last few years, and I actually just recently redid it completely. But the systems and habits layer is something I really kind of need to work on. I need to find a way to make a habit tracker kind of built into this system. But you can incorporate whatever habit tracker you want. It's just a matter of trying to do your habits every day. Like I do my Duolingo every day, although the notifications are pretty strong on here, which help quite a bit. But I want to have a way of incorporating that gamification the rest of my life. So maybe I'll do Habitica or something like that. However, the other aspect is weekly planning notes, and I still don't really quite do those as much. I'll be completely upfront about that. I focus more on the other notes at this point, but weekly notes I think are powerful because that way it allows you to plan out each day a little bit more effectively. Like this is what I need to get done this day, blah, 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 and then the next week you can move things over if you didn't get it done. Or if you did get it done, you can plan the next one. Finally, you have the 5th layer, the daily layer, and that's content and networking. And so I really started changing the system quite a bit because before I had the modular degree on the same layer as the content, but I moved the modular degree to the mind pillar on the 2nd layer. So let's go back to the 2nd layer just real quick so I can make sure I go over it because I changed this since the last video I made even. The quarterly layer, you have the body, which is your exercise workout plan. It's not really the habit tracker of exercise. It's the actual system that you are following, whatever framework, either a personal trainer or yourself or your app that you're using on your phone. That's where you keep that plan for your body. You might also keep your nutritional facts there too and keep track of some of that data. Then you have the mind pillar, which is your learning. This is like the stimulation of your brain. That's where I put the modular degree. It's a great fit. You're learning, you're keeping yourself stimulated. Cool. The spirit pillar, I have meditations and koans, which are like Buddhism, I guess you could say, studies. And you can focus on those koans and try to understand them. If you try to understand them, you probably won't, but that's kind of the point. It's like a challenge, a stimulation for the meditative side of yourself. And then the emotions one, this I'm still kind of working out, but it's EQ/gratitude. And while I don't necessarily do like gratitude notes, I know that a lot of people really like it. I figure this is a good place to put it because when you show gratitude, it changes your emotions. It starts to change your actual chemistry in your brain. I figure that's a good spot for it. Going back down to the daily pillar, or daily layer, content and networking. So you have your daily journal, which is personal. You're not going to post that. I do have my Fireside Codex, which is like a public journal that I do, but those are generally posts that I just want to, ideas I want to get out there that aren't actual like real blog posts or something else I can do. And then I have the content ecosystem, which is where I keep track of all my YouTube channels, my blogs, my podcasts, my newsletters, whatever, even ads. I have ideas for ads down the line. And then a networking base. Here's something I haven't mentioned before, really. And a networking base is really interesting because it allows you to keep track of the people you've met. And this is where I keep track of my guests from my shows. This is where I keep track of podcast hosts that interviewed me. This is even where I even keep some personal connections as well. Now, I don't really keep any like personal information in there, even though my system is private and safe and local. I want to make sure that like I don't keep any like phone numbers or anything like that in there. I just have stuff like, oh, here's their link to their social, something like that, or their birthday or something. And then finally, the last layer is archives and templates. And this is kind of going back to the idea of para, where the last A is archive. I think the archive is a little bit more disingenuous because it's not necessarily, it's more of a catch-all. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit in the other layers, it probably goes into this one. This is why templates is also on this layer. I found myself, especially if you're using a templating tool within something, like Capacities has templates, Acrim has templates, and Obsidian has templates, and so you can basically, when you make a new document in a certain folder, a template could be applied, or you could manually apply it, or something like that. And you need to have a folder that's dedicated, that's not going to move, that'll house all these different templates. Now, I need to get into this idea of why am I doing it now, right? Why is my channel about knowledge management for polymaths? And it's kind of funny because I'm streaming to Twitch right now, but that's mainly just due to the limitation of how YouTube works and on Streamlabs and stuff like that. But I figured the idea of how I wanted to focus on knowledge management for polymaths in particular is that I feel like the second brain para method, man, the bag's under my eyes. Sorry, I got distracted by that there. I feel like the para method, though, is more geared towards specialists. That's really what it felt like. And it also felt very limited, too, when it came to my content production. I really did not feel like it helped me organize any of my content. And so while the second brain concept is a really great idea, and you definitely should read the book and go check out the blog, I found that it really didn't suit a lot of people, especially since the para method and some of these other systems were made, like the GTD and Zettelkasten, they were all made prior to when these tools were created, so like Notion or Obsidian or anything like that. And so they were not geared towards creating your life in this modern era using modern tools. And so I created what I call the PIOS, the Poly Innovation Operating System, based around this topic. Whoever's viewing, hello. And I found that creating that system allowed me to have that holistic understanding. So I could have multiple different expertise, multiple different focuses, and actually be able to keep track of each one. And so creating this system allowed me to focus on my phases. So let me go back to my notes here. Basically, the phases are your knowledge areas, your disciplines, your different areas of expertise or what you want to work on. So I have different areas for like my gaming channel, my personal brand that you're watching now too, where it's about knowledge management for polymaths. And then my other channel is about content creators, right? Each one of these are different focuses. And I have another focus that's about swimming, right? I may not be doing all of them at once, although I am doing 3 of them at once right now. But how do you manage that? How do you organize your time? And that's where I started really focusing on coming up with this term called the phases. And these phases can sometimes interleave. They can maybe even be a little bit like sequential if you really want to. And I find that creating a folder of phases, these are all the phases that you want to achieve in your life or that you know of right now. You might have a new one down the line, especially if your curiosity is very strong. And so I had like my modular degree phase, which is what I started out on. From there, I kind of moved on to exercise with swimming and even the interviews that I had started doing. That was a real focus of my time. And then I had the content creator. While it is kind of sequential in the way I explained it, there was a lot of overlap. And there was definitely a time where I should have overlapped them a bit more. And I ended up focusing too much on one and not the other. And so it kind of goes back to the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. Do you spend 80% of your time on one thing, 20% on the other time on the other thing? I actually kind of split that up 10-80-10 because you have 10% of your time focusing on keeping the burn alive or the fire alive for a previous phase. 80% of your time on your current phase. And then 80% of the time on your future phase, sowing the seeds for it. And then right now, I'm kind of at this point where I'm doing 50-50 or even like 33-34 when it comes to splitting my attention because I want to be able to build out all 3 of these brands, these channels at the same time. If I do so, I think that would be a great way for me to pivot into like doing speaking down the line. Like here's how I built 3 YouTube channels at once. And that way I can have a unique kind of position to market myself for that. And then going back to the yearly layer, the first layer, I actually moved the phases from a different one to this because I figured when you're doing your yearly planning, that's when you're really going to be planning whether or not you're going to be working on this phase or that phase. And I'm saying phases, but just interchange that word with whatever interest you have. So if you have this is your career, this is your hobby, and this is something you want to do, maybe this is the career you want to have, all four of those different ideas or bubbles are a different phase. These phases, like I said, can overlap, they could be sequential, you can juggle them, but if you juggle too much, you could also find yourself to be a little unfocused. I hate saying that because I know that a lot of polymathic people have been told they're unfocused, and that's not necessarily it. It's more about time management and making sure you give enough time to each phase equally and not let your curiosity or obsession over one phase overtake another. Like, for example, the interviews that I did, I spent too much time on that, not enough time on my solo content, and that made me take a little bit longer to grow as a creator. And so, really, I'm not going to go too much deeper into this, but I wanted to create this live stream to test out live streaming in the first place, because I'm not even 100% sure if I'm streaming to YouTube or not. I'll find out after this, I guess. And then maybe it's the wrong stream key or something like that, but I didn't see the notification on YouTube. And then maybe I could switch accounts too. So I figured this would be a neat way of testing things out and finding a way to really start streaming a little bit more. I need to stream on my gaming channel, but I figured streaming on Twitch and YouTube, even on the main channel, is good enough for now. I'm going to end the stream now, maybe turn this into clips or short videos, but thanks for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave a comment or message me on Twitter or something like that. Cheers. I'm still live?